right, here we go. We are live. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode here of the Endless Report. This is episode 30. So we've been here for 30 episodes long now on the podcast. Thank you to everyone who's been watching since the beginning here, or maybe just starting now. But thanks for joining here at episode 30. We got a pretty big news week here. So as usual, I'm probably going to get right into the news stories. We got a lot to cover in the next hour or so. But this week we had a few decent releases I thought would be worth mentioning at the beginning of the show. So we had Plague Tale Requiem earlier this week on Tuesday, the sequel to the original Plague Tale game a few years back. They got some pretty good reviews this week, so definitely want to check that out myself. We also had Gotham Knights, the sequel to kind of the Gotham series of Batman games with Batgirl and Nightwing and Robin and the other heroes in the Batman universe. Unfortunately, the reviews there have been a little shaky. I'm going to have to check that game out later on myself, but it hasn't got the best reviews so far. We also had New Tales from the Borderlands, so another Telltale game in the Borderlands franchise. I think that got some decent reviews as well. And then we also have the Call of Duty campaign releasing early this week as well for next week's Call of Duty release. So if you pre-ordered that game, you could play that story mode a bit early. But that's about it for the releases this week. I just wanted to start off because we had a few interesting things this week, and we'll have more of that throughout the fall as well with God of War and a big few other games coming up in the next few weeks here. That being said, we are going to kind of just jump into the stories today as usual. I'm going to pull up our docket here, and we're going to start off with something a little interesting. This is, again, another story involving not directly Bethesda, I should say, but Bethesda RPGs, Fallout, The Elder Scrolls. A few things we talk about a lot on this show and on the channel. But speaking of that, we do have, as you can see here on the headline, we do have some news from Obsidian, also under Xbox and Microsoft's wing as of recent years, who has been talking about the potential of making a new Fallout game. So if you don't know already, if you're a fan of the Fallout franchise, you very may well know Fallout New Vegas was not developed by Bethesda Game Studios, who has made most of the mainline Fallout games since Fallout 3, not including the first Fallout games beforehand. That being said, Fallout New Vegas is definitely a fan favorite. It definitely leans heavily into RPG elements, something that Obsidian is very strongly, they're very heavily RPG focused studio in terms of their other titles for the most part, I would say. And, New Vegas is definitely a fan favorite. So this article comes as not really a surprise to fans. It's something Obsidian has talked about for a while, actually. But another kind of confirmation that if they did get the opportunity to make a Fallout game, they would. So while on the surface, this is a great story, I would say I would be cautiously optimistic on this, and I'll get into why on that in a second. But speaking on what actually was said here, we do have a quote here from Fallout New Vegas developer Obsidian, of course, the CEO Fergus Urquhart. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he said there's not a question about doing one if he was asked. So they weren't asked yet. There is no confirmation here before we get into this quote. But if they were asked, of course, they're up for the challenge here. He said, if we ever quote, if we ever got the opportunity to make another Fallout game, we'd make it, period. There's not even a question of whether or not we would do it. It's just, will the opportunity arise? Urquhart said, I hung around at Interplay for probably an extra year because I wanted to work on Fallout more. I love Fallout. So, of course, Interplay Studios, original Fallout Studios there. We don't, again, so with this quote, it's something that if I was working at Obsidian, I would say the same thing. Of course, we'd want to see another, whether it's a sequel to Fallout New Vegas or just a new adaptation of the Fallout series in a new location. I think that's something that everyone would want to see from Obsidian. Again, like I said, it's a fan favorite game of the series. That being said, there's nothing in motion right now. Obviously, Fallout 76 is the elephant in the room here, the current Fallout game. But I think people are really clamoring here for a new mainline entry into the single player RPG, narrative Fallouts that people are very much used to. So I don't think, as I said here before, I'm cautiously optimistic here, just because it's been many years. I would say 8 years almost now since Fallout 4, the last mainline entry, you could say, in the series. We're coming up on 10 years at least, and I don't think this Obsidian game, and certainly not any Bethesda potential Fallout game I could see on the horizon in the next few years or so here. So it bears the question, even if we had another studio like Obsidian come in to take some of the slack off of Bethesda's big docket. Of course, they have Starfield, originally supposed to come out in a few weeks here in November, but now coming out in early 2023. And then we also have Elder Scrolls 6, the next thing on the docket for them. So Fallout is well into the 2030s, I dare to even say, which is a crazy thing to say at this point in time. But I don't think we're getting another mainline Bethesda Studios Fallout game which they had said Fallout 5 will be after that Elder Scrolls game in the next 5-6 years, whenever that comes out. So very, very, a very large amount of time there in between when we get the next main Fallout game. So even if Obsidian could come in here, after what they have going on with Grounded, with Avowed, with Pentiment, with a few of their RPGs in the works here. I know Pentiment's out this fall, a few weeks actually. I should check into that. Avowed coming out hopefully in the next year or so. We haven't heard much on that game at all since it's a reveal, but they have said, after that, docket of things here, Grounded is also, has left early access, is in full development. I think Grounded is wrapping up as well. This may leave an opportunity here for Obsidian to bring on a new Fallout project. That being said, even if they started right now, today, I would assume it's going to take, a few years down the pipeline here. So we're looking at least 10 plus years between major Fallout installments. And again, not to, take away from Fallout 76 or anything, but I'm just, despite all the, that game's issues, its triumphs, everything that game's gone through with its community, again, it's not a single player Fallout game. So that's where I'm making that distinction. But yeah, I do think this was something that they tweeted as well here. I didn't want to show this, that they were just, calling out Fallout as a franchise. This was the Fallout 25th anniversary, I believe, last week when we covered that Phil Spencer story on that. So yeah, this was something that Obsidian had said, I believe, 2-3 years ago when they first got bought out by Xbox, and Bethesda was then bought out by Xbox. After that Bethesda acquisition, Obsidian did tweet something similar of, someone said, "Can you make a Fallout game now?" And they said, "I guess so. It looks like that can happen." So I remember that was a very, very big deal on Twitter. I think it got hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets. So obviously, Obsidian Fallout game is something people would very much be around for and looking forward to here. Again, we're gonna have to wait and see what happens with that. But as I said, it's a tough one because it's already been almost 10 years since the last game. I'm obviously a fan of this series myself, and I wouldn't want to have to wait another 10 years. Then again, I wouldn't want something that was rushed. Of course not. But I think, 10, 15, 20 years for something that was such a major installment of a franchise. I mean, Fallout 4 performed incredibly for them. I think that's a tough period for them in general. I think, we have the new Fallout TV show coming out on Amazon. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to release it in that, but we've covered that on the show. If you've been watching the show, you've seen some of those behind the scenes screenshots we've gotten. So with that game coming out, obviously you have Fallout Shelter, the mobile game. You have Fallout 76 staying alive. Do they plan on just continuing to put content to Fallout 76 or maybe a new mobile game or Fallout Shelter? I'm not sure what their plan is there. Obviously, a lot of video game shows are coming out at the moment. We talked a lot about The Last of Us on this show and how they really released the first game. They have that multiplayer Factions Last of Us multiplayer game coming out at some point, probably around the release of the show. So it seems like they're, keeping that kind of cohesive when it comes to, tying everything together. So I think Fallout's kind of missing an opportunity here. I mean, this is years in the making since they've had an opportunity to kind of get this off the ground. Obviously, Obsidian has their own stuff going on. That's the obvious contender for someone they would trust other than, Bethesda themselves to make one of these Fallout, mainline games. But who knows? I could talk about this probably all show. So I do want to move on in a moment here. But then again, if that could happen in the near future, it'd be a very exciting announcement. I would not be complaining whatsoever. I just hope we'll get, less than a 10, 15-year gap between, these games in the series. It's really unfortunate. We already have that 10-year gap being hit now next year with Skyrim as well. Or it was hit last year, I should say. We're already at 11 years with Skyrim. So, that's become a trend with, now Fallout as well is going to hit that 10-year mark. So hopefully Bethesda can maybe speed up their process. I'm very excited for Starfield. I can live without Fallout for a few more years, but I think the Fallout franchise itself would benefit from people who aren't like me or just kind of fans of the Bethesda series in general. All three really looking forward to here. But people who are very much just Fallout fans, they're definitely having to wait for a very long time. And I hope that they can figure out something here to make it, better for everybody. But I'm going to move on. I digress because, as I said, I could talk about that all day. It's an idea that is very exciting for a potential game idea. But I'm going to swap over here on our docket and bear with me a moment as I get to our next story. I'm just going to pull up another article here on the side. This one was something that was teased earlier in the week and we got more information on. So just starting off here, we got this, I want to say on Monday afternoon, if I'm correct here. Well, I can check the tweet here. It was October 16th. So yeah, that was, I believe, Sunday afternoon, actually. But yeah, this is the Silent Hill transmission. So we talked a lot about Silent Hill actually on the show a few weeks. I want to say during the summer. It was when everything, all the rumors were kind of running wild during the summer on what would be, at the showcases and what would be delayed. So this was something that was being talked about earlier in the year. and ended up, of course, being true. We did get, rumors that there will be some sort of Silent Hill announcement, whether it's a remake, a remaster, a new game. We were getting these rumors a lot. Konami even said themselves, oh, I'm sorry, I have an alarm going off here. Let me just silence that. But Konami did even say themselves that they had something lined up here later in the fall. It was around Tokyo Game Show, I think, when they made that announcement. So here we finally get this teaser for Silent Hill Transmission. So as you can see, the tweet, as I've been speaking, this was on Wednesday, October the 19th. They kind of teased some announcements here. And of course, I will get into what they announced on Wednesday. So let me just pull that article up real quick here. I'll do that right on screen. And let me scroll to the top. I was reading through this myself before again, so I have to go back to the top here. But as you can see, there was a lot announced here. Obviously, we got one of those IGN articles here with the big rundown of everything at the showcase, as they like to do for some of the big showcases here. But of course, this is a very small one, very focused just on Silent Hill, of course. But we had more than one game announcement, so it's not just a single game showcase. It's a few different associated announcements here, which I think is pretty cool. So Konami is obviously coming back to Silent Hill in a big way. This brand has been very, I guess I want to, what would I say there? Not off the market, but, out of the public, I guess, view for a while in terms of mainline, new entries. So Silent Hill is making a comeback here, starting off, and I'll see how they put this in order here in the article, but this is where I'd want to start anyway, the Silent Hill 2 remake. So bear in mind, as someone who I'm someone who has not played the Silent Hill series. So if you're a diehard Silent Hill fan, I apologize if I'm missing out on certain things, or maybe certain Easter eggs here, or things that you could see in the remake that are obviously calling back to the original game. I don't have that same reference frame, so I would recommend, if you are a Silent Hill fan, definitely check out these trailers. Definitely go in on your own and compare to the original titles and see how you feel about it. Because I know when people do, when games like this are remade or remastered, people get very opinionated about how honorable it is to the original game. And I wouldn't, as someone who hasn't played the original game, I wouldn't be the best judge of that. So just keep that in mind as I go through all these announcements here on this article. But that being said, in terms of just tech, I mean, this is again, I don't know the name of the monster here, but I've seen this monster before from Silent Hill. It looks very frightening. You can see the graphics here, this cockroach, some of the lighting on the ground. Very interesting, very creepy, intricate lighting here on these screenshots. You can see the details on the character, on the environments. I know I'm going pretty quick through here, but you can see it's very ominous, very gray, cloudy kind of art style here. You can see this fog. This looks really interesting. Heavy fog. I'm sure there's some, wind and texture work here going on. Again, I did not watch the full trailer. So I take that in mind. I'm not playing the full trailer on screen, but there is some motion here. That being said, plenty of screenshots. Again, if you're a fan of Silent Hill 2, you probably know what you're looking at here. So I'm kind of just getting through that. Again, getting a little creepy here. I think I'm going to stop for now. I just want to just keep going through screenshots rest of the show here. But again, this is being made by Bloober Team, who are developing a full remake of Silent Hill 2 with the help of the original Team Silent artist Masahiro Ito and composer Akira Yamaka. Again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing anything there. The remake was announced exclusively for PlayStation 5. I'm not sure if this is coming to PC as well anytime soon. I would bet it probably will. Maybe not at launch, but maybe sometime after launch. But I don't think we got any news on a PC release. That being said, it's a fully reworked game, new tech. It's going to be in 4K, build up, ground up for the PS5. So very interesting, kind of in line with a lot of the other remakes we've seen this generation. And I know the remake conversation this generation is something that's pretty, I guess the word here would be prominent. I guess there's a lot of remake and remaster conversations, I feel like. And I think that the conversation is always, well, we want new games. Why is everything being remastered? And I think, we're kind of in an interesting period here where the new consoles really haven't come into their own yet. We really haven't seen those full PS5, Series X, what have you, releases yet that really just take advantage of the new gen hardware and aren't really limiting themselves to the older generation. So with remasters, I think we're seeing a lot of remasters just because of the, immense power jump we saw this generation compared to last and even the previous generation. So you see a lot of PS3, Xbox 360 era games and even earlier getting remastered. And that makes sense to me just because, these are fan favorite games. These are classic games. And this is, we've seen remasters on the PS4 era, the PS3 era even. But I think now we're at a time where remasters are really making a lot more sense because games are getting to this high level of, fidelity and quality and detail. And it just, I think it makes sense in a kind of timeline way when I look back at it. So I know people kind of are wondering why there's so many remakes, but I think overall, it's a good thing. As long as we're getting, new and exciting titles as well, I'm more than happy to see these awesome, older titles get remastered in a new light. So that being said, I digress there. I'll move on to the next Silent Hill announcement. This one was very interesting to me. This is a game from Annapurna Interactive. So if you don't know Annapurna, they're kind of known as, I would say, for lack of a better term, a kind of a double A studio. They're a pretty highly, known studio, but they're more known for their indie and highly polished, I would say, indie titles. Most recently, Stray is probably their most notable recent release, I would say, over this year. If you don't know Stray, the cat game that was released on PC and PlayStation. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic game, and you play as a cat. It's something we've talked about on the show before, if you remember. But I think Annapurna Interactive is a really interesting studio. They take a lot of interesting ideas and run with it, and make games that I think are definitely. I look at them almost like I've said this before on the show, kind of like an indie film studio. They take a lot of interesting ideas, and they really have this high production value. I kind of see them as like this wouldn't really be indie here, but almost like an A24 to film, to having a film analogy there of video games. I think they're a really cool studio. So to see they're doing a kind of spin-off here of the Silent Hill franchise is very interesting. There's not much else to say there, but it's being developed by No Code Studios under Annapurna, so it's something to know there. They did develop Stories Untold, if you know that. And we also have one or two more announcements. We have Silent Hill F, which is another spin-off Silent Hill game. This one's set in the 60s in Japan. It's a narrative-driven spin-off game, and it's written by acclaimed Japanese writer Ryakushi07. Again, I'm not sure I'm familiar with that writer. Maybe it looks like a username. I'm not familiar with their work, but they've created visual novels like Higurashi and Umineko. Again, I have not read those myself. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing those, but again, they are a widely known writer, so I'm sure there are fans of the writer who are very excited for that. And I think that's cool when video games do, embrace, this is the narrative. Of course, I'd want a game to embrace the narrative. It's a narrative-driven game, but I think it's good when you see the, developers investing in known, writers and things like that. Again, I wouldn't say you just have to invest in the writer because they're known. Again, I digress there. I think you know what I mean. I think that's a cool announcement there. That being said, we have one final one with Silent Hill Ascension. This is, as they say in the article, probably the most unique announcement here, which is kind of plays around with a new Silent Hill story. And I'm not sure exactly how this is working, so I think I'm going to play the trailer for this one as well. But people have committed us to Let's Play Pokemon, as you can see here. With kind of collaboration here between Genvid Entertainment, Bad Robot Games, if you don't know Bad Robot, the film studio, Behavior Interactive, and DJ2 Entertainment. So as I let this ad run up on top, I will play this trailer again. There is no sound here. Just bear that in mind. But I am going to play this briefly just so we get an idea of what's going on here. But we see it's kind of this, again, I'm not exactly sure from what I read earlier on this and from when I watched the trailer earlier, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but it seems to be a kind of a collaborative multiplayer experience. So I'm not sure how that will play out in real life, but you could see there's these messages here. I believe this is being played out in a mobile format. This is something that's kind of interesting. I think we'll have to see more on here. But again, I'm just kind of skipping through here. A very broad cinematic trailer. We'll see live in 2023. Face your trauma together. So some sort of mobile interactive game with your friends. I'm not sure exactly how that'll work, but very interesting idea there. I guess I think we'll have to see more on that about how that works out. That being said, the last thing, I said this was the last one because this is not a game announcement, this final one. This is actually a new film. So Christopher Gans, the director of the first Silent Hill movie, is making a third movie in the series with the return to Silent Hill. Details are being kept under wraps for now, but Konami is promising more information about the project at a later date. There's like a 7-minute feature about this film. I'm not going to play this just because I want to keep the focus on the games here today in the news. But that being said, if you do want to check out any of that conference or this trailer specifically, I would recommend going back and checking out that Silent Hill transmission broadcast. But that being said, again, I'm not the biggest Silent Hill fan, so I don't have much else to say on that. And that kind of brings me to the end of the announcements there. But I would want to make sure we covered any big conference like that or showcase. That's pretty cool to see another showcase pop up this week. All right, so I think we're gonna get with the next story here. I'll move on here. We're almost halfway through the show, and I'm only on the third story. So as I usually say, I worry that I'm going too fast in the beginning, but these stories definitely pile up. So I do want to continue through here. So I apologize for the pacing here if I'm going a little fast, but I do want to make sure I'm not sitting here monologuing for 3 hours. I don't think, unless we have a giant news week, that's not the most fun thing to listen for that long. So I want to make sure you guys can get all the info in a pretty short time here. So that being said, I'm going to stop explaining that. We're going to get to the next story here. This one was a pretty quick one, but one I thought was worth covering because it was exciting personally for me, I would say. So I talked a lot about recently the Spider-Man 2 game coming from Insomniac, wondering if we're going to see that this fall. Again, I've been really waiting on that next Sony showcase. We haven't heard anything from that recently. There have been some rumors around that they may have canceled or delayed a showcase. I'm not sure those were true. I think, you see a lot of online internet rumors every few 2-3 weeks of like, there's gonna be another showcase or another conference. So I took all those with a grain of salt, and I think that was for the best. That being said, we did get some, more promotion here for Spider-Man Miles Morales. This is being released on PC very soon. But that being said, with these tweets, we had fans clamoring and asking Insomniac again, where's Spider-Man 2? Are we gonna get a trailer? Is anything happening with that? And Insomniac actually responded. So just for some context, they have not spoken on Spider-Man 2 since that trailer originally revealed in 2021, over a year ago now. So now we get these comments from some fans on Twitter. Spider-Man 2 trailer, release date in 2023, and we still have nothing. Someone else says, I'm starting to get worried. I've been bugging Insomniac about it, but I've stopped after they told me it wasn't ready. I really hope it doesn't get delayed. So just some fan chatter here. But Insomniac actually decides to respond. They said, as in don't worry. We're making good progress, and it's still slated for 2023. Showing games takes time, effort, resources, and coordination. That's very true, that last sentence. But again, maybe this isn't an official confirmation from the dev team, but at least according to the community team over there at Insomniac, things are looking good. There are no behind-the-scenes delays or anything like that we don't, that we're not aware of. Everything seems to be on track. So that's good news. And we then got about 8 or 9 articles across the internet. Spider-Man's still coming out in 2023. All these articles basically just citing this tweet and confirming that, just like I am right now. Because, it wasn't really an official announcement. There was no press release. This wasn't Insomniac Games doing anything, crazy like that. But even just saying this, if they're not commenting on the game for a year or so in terms of release dates and progress, it is, I would say, hopefully encouraging. I think this doesn't guarantee anything. I'm knocking on wood here. I wouldn't want to jinx anything by saying it's definitely coming out next year and then it gets delayed. We saw that with Starfield. It was very imminently coming out this summer. I've mentioned probably the third time for the show, and that was delayed because that was supposed to be coming out right around God of War a few weeks here, about 2-3 weeks. So again, we'll see there. Knocking on wood, that stays in 2023. But that's a good, nice little reminder from Insomniac there for Spider-Man. I'm happy with that. But we're going to be moving on here to our next story. So I'm moving my marker over, and we'll get that next article up on screen for you all in a moment. But we're going to be sticking with PlayStation here. So we talked about this, again, a little bit of an update here. We talked about this a few weeks ago on the show with the announcement of the PlayStation 5 Dualsense Edge. So the Dualsense Edge is the new premium controller, I guess you would call it, from PlayStation. I almost said Elite there because I'm comparing it to the Xbox Elite controller. In similar vein over on the Xbox side of things. So PlayStation gets their own Pro controller now. So previously, if you wanted a Pro controller, you'd either have the Xbox Elite, or if you wanted a PlayStation DualSense version or a DualShock back in the day, you would go with a SCUF controller or another custom brand like that, a third-party brand. Now, PlayStation wants to get in on that themselves by having their own Pro controller. But then again, we now get the release date, the price point, a few other details this week. So I wanted to briefly cover that. And the price point is not too insignificant. We're getting a $200 USD price point there. It's about 210 euros there, I believe. So pre-orders are opening up this upcoming week, actually on the 25th. So I believe that's on Tuesday or Wednesday. Forgive me. Today's the 21st here. That's next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, pre-orders go up for the DualSense Edge. And let me get this in screen a little bit more so you all can check this out in a little bit more detail. I tried to zoom there. The zoom doesn't really cooperate with me on these articles. It kind of zooms everything out. So I'm going to leave it as is. I think that's pretty, sizable there. You can see the controller. As you can see, very similar, of course, to the original DualSense design. Then again, you have these black buttons here. You have a little bit more of this glossy finish rather than that matte black finish on the front. Same here with the touchpad. And then again, of course, the main reason you get this controller is the features here. So you have interchangeable triggers, interchangeable thumbsticks, with different concave or convex and different heights there. You also have these back pedals that you can attach to the controller. So instead of having to, if you're not someone who plays competitive gaming, you may kind of laugh at things like this. But if you're a competitive gamer, these little seconds matter a lot, so you're not having to move your thumb from the X button to the trigger to either jump or dive while you're running around and shooting, whether it's a competitive shooter or something of the like, usually when these are used. Again, if you're not a competitive gamer, you may think $200 being able to not move my hand for a split second may not be worth it for me. But if you're a competitive gamer, you know how much being able to use a back pedal or an alternate button instead of moving your hands can really make a difference in a split second fight like that. It really could make or break it for the winner or the loss there. So again, if you're into high competitive gaming, fast movements here, obviously you're gonna have a lot more options with some different inputs here, as well as some options and how you're using your thumbsticks and exactly how that fits in your hand. Then again, you get this USB-C cord, of course, and a carrying case, which I think is pretty nice. But then again, I do think at $200, you have to be really into gaming daily and wanting these features, or just into competitive gaming, because I don't think it's that much more worth just a normal DualSense. One of the things you pay for with these controllers, I think, is also the premium feeling, especially with the Xbox Elite controller. It's heftier, it has a nicer texture to it. It's not, I wouldn't want to say cheap, because I don't think the controllers, have ever really been cheap for any, console, but it doesn't have that hollow plastic feel, I guess, you would usually have with a typical controller. That being said, the DualSense, more so than any other controller really ever, I think. And don't get me wrong, I really like the Series X controller as well. I think ergonomically it's fantastic. It's the best Xbox controller they ever had. That being said, the DualSense is very hefty. It's very premium already, where it's has these heavy haptic drivers in it. It feels very solid. It's the kind of controller that if I drop it by accident, I'll put it down or something on the table. If it falls, I'm like, oh no, I feel like I'm dropping my cell phone and I'm going to break the screen. It's because of how hefty it is, I feel like I'm going to break something. So obviously breaking it's not a good thing, but that quality, that sense of quality, is something that you already get with the kind of $60, $70 controller, the base DualSense here. So if I bring this back up, I'm not sure if I would personally be jumping on a $200 version of this immediately, considering I also have the default white PlayStation controller. I think if I wanted an alternate color, maybe in the future, I know like the all blackout controller, like the PlayStation 4 DualShock and previous PlayStation controllers, is pretty cool. Maybe if they create a blacked out version of this DualSense Edge, I would maybe consider that in the future. But as someone who's already has a secondary controller, I have the purple one as well. The DualSense, I think, is pretty cool color. I don't think I'm jumping on a new Pro controller here. That being said, for those of you who are very active and competitive gamers, this is being, you can pre-order this next week. It's coming out in January, I believe. So I'm wondering if there will be some backlog there in terms of orders and how fast they're shipping these out. But, they are giving this pre-order window, so maybe they will sell out there. So if you do really want to get on one of these really, really soon, I would recommend hopping on that pre-order next week on the 25th. But that being said, I believe January 26th. Yes, January 26th is the release date here officially. That being said, we're going to move on here away from PlayStation and hop into something new, because we're about the halfway part of the show here. We're about halfway through the news. We're going to see if we can stay under an hour here today. But bear with me as I move on to this next article. And I'll pull this up real quickly. We're kind of getting back to Microsoft, actually. And unfortunately, this is not good news here. So I'm going to move our marker down here. Hopefully it's in the right position. So we will bring this up. Yes, so as you can see now on screen, if you're watching on video, not much else to say other than what's written there. Microsoft has unfortunately laid off hundreds and hundreds of staff members. They're saying maybe up to 1,000, maybe a little slightly below 1,000 members of staff, not just in Microsoft, but also this is including Xbox and some of the gaming divisions as well, from what people have seen online. So this story is about a day or two outdated, so there may have been more information online about who exactly was let go here, or what departments were affected here. But as we saw earlier this week, what we know so far is that a little bit less than 1,000 staff were laid off across Xbox. As I said, forward-looking, Microsoft Strategic Missions and Technology Organization and the Office of the CTO was affected here. So again, obviously, Microsoft is a tech company. I'm not sure exactly what's outside their Strategic Missions and Technology Organization, what's outside of that scope, but everything inside of that scope may have been affected here. So that's something to note. Studio Alpha, which is Microsoft's serious gaming initiative that focused on war gaming simulations, which is something I've not really personally heard of this project name before. So that's kind of an interesting description there. But it's also at risk, according to the source, alongside mission expansion, cloud government team. So that's a very interesting sentence there. Before I get into obviously the unfortunate nature of these layoffs here, I do think this sentence is interesting, and I wanted to touch on this very briefly because we did get news in the past about Microsoft, of course, working in, cloud simulation, working with HoloLens, even working with the military and signing contracts there to develop HoloLens, programming and software for military use. This was a pretty controversial article and discussion. It kind of went over, overboard, and everybody kind of forgot about it. But this was a deal that was made between Microsoft and the U.S. military. We see here that Microsoft's serious gaming initiative that focuses on wargaming simulations and the mission expansion cloud government team. Again, I have no idea what I'm talking about there. I have no idea what that is. I'm just reading that at face value. So take that as you will, as for what I say next here. I'm reading that at face value, just like you are. When I read things like that, I go, does this have anything to do with that? That military training simulations that they were working on? I'm assuming that if they were working with the military on HoloLens, interactive software, that there would be some sort of simulations or training modules made around that kind of headset and heads-up display software to test it out. So I do think maybe that had something to do with that. That's just my 2 cents. That's my kind of prediction there. I'm not sure, but it sounds like that may have had to do with that government deal, considering that, what we're reading here, the mission expansion government team and wargaming simulations. I don't know anything else that Microsoft has publicly worked on that was a war game simulation. They're not, working on any, obviously, other than, their gaming initiatives like Halo and Gears of War. I don't think there's anything like that, like an Arma level type mil sim type gaming project that's specifically for consumers. So that makes me think this is very much involved with that government deal. But again, I don't want to just say something that's out of left field there. That's just my 2 cents. So take that as you will. And then again, unfortunately, Microsoft's mission engineering team may also be effective. Its leader, Zach Kramer, sent an email to employees announcing it would be deprioritizing work already underway. The email continued, "This is hard to do. There are a lot of ideas that potentially have an impact on each of us as worked very hard on. We must make trade-offs as resources are not unlimited and the time is scarcest of them all." So this may be an implication that some of these teams at Microsoft may be affected by this very soon, if not already. Unfortunately, this is something that there's more quotes in this email here. "Like all companies, we evaluate our business priorities on a regular basis and make structural adjustments accordingly," a Microsoft spokesperson said to Insider. "We will continue to invest in our business and hire in key growth areas in the year ahead." So that's just Microsoft's official statement after these layoffs. But they did announce in July a plan to lay off less than 1% of its workforce, which currently sits around 180,000 people. So around 1,800 people could be, at risk of these layoffs. Again, around 1,000 we're hearing here probably already were laid off just recently. So very unfortunate news. Obviously, this is coming amidst all the the news with Xbox-Activision and that buyout. I actually have some more on that later in the show, as you probably saw above me in the docket here on screen, and some more on Xbox as well. So I do want to move on to that in a moment, but again, just to wrap up there, it is unfortunate to hear that. Hopefully, that all these employees that were part of this layoff here can find another position. But that being said, we wish everyone the best there. Hopefully that works out for both the employees and for Microsoft there. But that's an unfortunate thing to hear this week. That being said, I do think we have more unfortunate news from Microsoft this week. So bear with me for one moment as I move our marker down, and I'll pull that next article up here as I put us on this screen. And we're almost here. All right. So as I said, another slightly negative article here for Xbox. We had some reports from a few, and these are from third-party studios. Originally, this was from the release this week of Gotham Knights. So as I had said earlier, Gotham Knights unfortunately didn't get the best reviews this week. There was controversy over it having a 30 FPS limit, even on next-gen consoles, and we're going to get into that in a second. There were some, I wouldn't say controversies here, but some disappointment, from the fans in terms of the combat, from the menu systems, in terms of a few other things, unfortunately, in terms of the quality of the release. So, I'm just going to take one sip of water. I've been talking here for about 40 minutes. But thank you for bearing with me there. I think that this is something that's pretty interesting to me because it's something that kind of came up very heavily about 2 years ago when the generation first started and the Xbox Series X and S were revealed and released, that the Xbox Series S could potentially become a bottleneck for the entire generation, given that Xbox had this requirement that every single Xbox Series X game must also be compatible on Series S and run on PC. So Series S is a requirement right now for current third-party games on Xbox, meaning if you want to make a third-party game that's on PlayStation and Xbox, it has to run on the Series S as well. And if you don't know, the Series S is very much lower powered than the Xbox Series X and PS5. meaning it's kind of at a midway point between this generation and last. I can kind of get into the details there with the CPU, the GPU, but I digress. If you know about the Series S, you probably know all about that already. So I don't want to get too deep into the details there. But that being said, in layman's terms here, it very much is less power than the Series X. That's why it's $200 cheaper. It's not just the lack of a disk drive and their marketing term that it runs 1440p and not 4K. It's kind of a more a marketing term, but rather it's not just an activation or a switch for 4K. It's rather it's not physically capable of running games at 4K because it's very much less powered and has less, has a less teraflop GPU, has a lower performing CPU. There's a few factors into that, so just bear that in mind. That being said, we get reports here after this release here of Gotham Knight this week that a few third-party developers have said that they just don't want to work on the Series S anymore, and they're I'm using the word clamoring a lot today, but they're begging Xbox to please bring down this requirement. So as we get into this here, we have VFX artist Ian McClure, who was reported by VGC here saying, quote, Series S is holding back next-gen games argument seems really broken to me. He says that he responds to a number of developers actually do want the Series S requirement dropped. So there's a bit of an argument here. We see that Ian McClure, who is posting here, he believes that this argument is a little broken. We see that developers saying that many studios, though, are trying to drop this requirement, and I've talked to Xbox about this. And so there's a bit of a disagreement here. There's a bit of a disagreement here around launch as well. If you could build this game for next gen and you could scale it down, who says you can't have a performance mode or like many of these other games we see these days having where they have the 30 FPS mode, they have the 60 FPS mode, even 120 hertz. Is this just extra developer work here that isn't being done? Is this a limit of the console itself? That's the question that a lot of people seem to be disagreeing on, even those who are technically knowledgeable in the industry. And I do want to, before I have give any of my thoughts, I would say we read more in the article here about what those in the industry are saying. So McClure continues here what he means by broken, this argument. So he says, it might sound broken, but the reason you're hearing it a lot right now is because many developers have been sitting in meetings for the past year desperately trying to get the Series S launch requirements dropped. Studios have been through one development cycle where the Series S turned out to be an albatross or a worry, a hindrance here around the neck of production. And now the games are firmly being developed with new consoles in mind. Teams do not want to repeat that process. This is what McClure says, whose account is now private at the time of writing after this interview he took. So again, I'm not sure why he says his argument is broken. Maybe by that he means there shouldn't be an argument at all. Because when I first read that, it almost sounded to me as if he didn't agree and that it wasn't a hindrance. But the more he speaks, the more it seems he's very much adamant that many developers, not just him, the one who's talking, many developers have asked Xbox to drop this requirement. So of course, as you can see here, they're just reviewing what I had said earlier. It was designed as a more cost-efficient console. It's again targeting a 1440p resolution. That also means that its specs cannot run 4K. It's not just a resolution target, and even at 1440p, again, it's not hitting 60 FPS in high settings and a lot of things you would expect out of a next-gen game. So that's something that's, again, I will take that with a grain of salt, that description there, but this comes after, again, Gotham Knights confirmed to run a maximum of 30 FPS, which had a lot of fans clamoring and wondering, could this be because of, the release of the Series S? What is going on here? Why is this limited? Again, the jury's kind of out on what exactly, is happening here. Is this just a lack of developers being able to add this mode? I'm not exactly sure here. I do believe that, whether it's a limit or not, let's put that aside for a second, the technical aspect of that, whether it is or not, it's 100% just objectively more effort to develop on another console. That's something we've always known. That's something that's been very clear for as long as game development has been a thing, that it's developed on multiple consoles. It does take extra work. Things just don't work across the board that way, especially on a much less powered console. So whether or not they're going with the least common denominator here and developing across all accounts here to make sure everything would run on something as low powered as the Series S. Again, I'm not sure if that's the implication here, but being able to develop at scale and saying we're going to have the definitive PS5 Series X version that could definitely not run on Series S, that takes, extra work to delineate those versions, develop those versions, figure out what features are running where and where else and why not. So again, this is something that I could probably speculate on all day, but until we have a direct answer from developer game by game, it's not something you can just objectively make a decision on. So a lot of these conversations are dominated by just Twitter discourse and by developers speaking out. So again, I wouldn't want to just add to speculation here. What I do think though is that personally, as I said here, it takes effort, and I'm very much adamant that if you're going to get into new generation, I don't know why the Series S I get why, from a marketing standpoint, why it was created. I don't see any real positive though to this generation of gaming come from the Series S being available. Again, obviously, if you want to be able to purchase a cheap gaming console and be able to run certain games and stream Netflix for only $300, obviously, I'm not saying that's not a good, avenue for you if you're just a casual gamer. That being said, just the existence of that console, I do agree to an extent, is holding back the next generation at some point, at least for cross-player, I should say, third-party games that aren't PlayStation exclusives, because just having to consider that at all adds extra time to development. It adds extra time to polish, to maybe scale down things, whether it's, resolution factors, ray tracing, lighting features, whatever it may be, to get it into a playable state on Series S. That takes extra time for the development, takes extra time for the developers, and either way, that could be time focused on making a next generation game that doesn't have to be downscaled again, to a lower generation console. This was always the argument for cross generation games. Every time we transition from PS3 to PS4, whatever generation it was. So I don't know why this is something that's going to be held up for the entire generation. And Microsoft never thought that was going to be a problem. It's something I kind of forgot about, actually, because back in 2020, when this was released, everybody was saying, when are they going to drop support for the Series S? Because until they do, this is going to be a continuing bottleneck problem for every game. So again, I digress. I don't know if this is exactly, the situation. If again, for PlayStation exclusive games, it may not be the same scenario. Obviously, for Xbox games, it very much is. We're gonna have to see how developers continue to scale or deal with the Series S, if this requirement will be dropped in the future. But essentially, once that requirement's dropped, you're gonna see a lot less games getting released for it. And you'll see big blockbuster games just not coming out on Series S, and that's gonna be something that, a dropped promise for those who purchased the console in the first place. So it doesn't really put Microsoft in a good position in any light, really. But then again, this kind of started about 2 years ago when the console released itself. So we're gonna have to wait and see there. Obviously, developers are saying, apparently, again, allegedly, that a lot of developers are not happy with that. So we're gonna have to wait and see how that plays out here. But we're gonna move on actually to something a bit on the PlayStation side of things now. As you can see here, we have some news on that new Final Fantasy game. So bear with me here as I pull that up. That being said, as I said for Silent Hill, I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy fan. So if you are, apologies. I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy fan here. We do have just some summaries here, though, of the trailer that we got for the new game. Again, nothing really new here. So I am just actually going to pull up a few quick tweets here just to show you, kind of summarize exactly what happened. So bear with me as I pull this marker down, and let's get into it. All right. So again, this is Nibel on Twitter again. Someone he tweets a lot of summaries of these game conferences and announcements, which is very helpful, actually. Someone who, I see it on Twitter immediately. It's easier for me to get into the report. But he did tweet about the trailer that was released. Surprisingly, here we did get an English version as well, and then a few screenshots here. I'm not going to show the whole trailer just for sake of time here, and the fact that, again, I don't know much about Final Fantasy. Again, I know each Final Fantasy entry is a different entry to the series, completely new characters, new environment. This is, it's not related to the old titles at all. But then again, we don't have audio here. I want to make sure we can get these last few stories in time. So I'm just going to kind of go through a few of these screenshots here. But as you can see, we did get some brief shots of combat, some more of the characters. Seems very in line with what we saw from the last trailer. Again, I'm not too knowledgeable of exactly the Final Fantasy story, but we did get some artwork here, some kind of concept character art, which I think is pretty cool. And even some notices from the developers, which is what I really wanted to show. So bear with me as I pull that up as well. But there were a lot of tweets here, so I figured I would just show you all the tweets. Again, those were just some screenshots, but we did get a message from the producer of the game and the director of the game. And here we see that they both said, I'm not going to zoom in here just for to keep the tab a little neat and tidy, but we do get confirmation here that we're going to hear more from this game soon, that they're kind of wrapping up development. So we may see a 2023 release for this game. I think maybe fall 2023 sounds really realistic, maybe even spring, summer. But we're going to have to wait a little longer to hear on that. But they did say, quote unquote here, and I'm looking over my screen because I'm zooming into the monitor where I'm reading this, but they did say, with regards to development, the team has turned the corner and entered the home stretch and is currently concentrating its efforts on debugging, tweaking, polishing, and optimization. So, quote, that's a clear quote right there. They're very much in the polishing stages. I think, unless there's some unforeseen, again, knock on wood here, some unforeseen major shakeup or hiccup in development, I think we see a 2023 release for Final Fantasy, making 2023 look really promising for PlayStation here. Hopefully, we hear more on what's going on with Spider-Man, with some other games. But again, 2023 seems pretty jam-packed, not just for them, but also third party as well. That's pretty much it though for Final Fantasy. As I said, I am gonna go pretty quickly through these next few as we're trying to get in under the hour here today. I got about 10, 12 minutes left. So we are going to move on to our next story. So bear with me again as I pull up that next screen here. But this one's actually back around the way here. Still PlayStation, actually, I should say, but a little bit. It's a little bit different here. So bear with me as I pull this up. And this one is another, speaking of, I shouldn't say remakes really, but more of a revival here. We get some news from Bungie actually at PlayStation that they are set to revive the Marathon series. So again, I haven't said this a lot today, but this is another series I had not played personally, but this was a series that was released by Bungie back in the 90s, I believe in 1994. The original game came out. I may be incorrect on that. But yeah, actually, first release 1994. Okay, I don't know why I knew that. I guess I remember it from reading the article earlier. But yeah, the first Marathon game was released in 1994 with two sequels in 95 and 96. It released around 200,000 units sold by 2002, which is a pretty good metric, especially for the time, given the sales then. But this new shooter apparently is going to be a 3-man squad extraction-based shooter. So kind of interesting, a little different for the series. That being said, the title is in a pre-alpha state, according to some sources, but it can be announced at any point given the industry's competition for talent. Then again, Marathon takes place on a planet that was previously home to a human colony that vanished, with humans now sparse, using highly customization cyborgs called runners to gather loot, it was said. So it's understood the gameplay of Luba Marathon is similar to most extraction-based shooters. Choose a mission, buy and choose your loadout, drop it to the map, hunt for loot, complete missions, and extract safely. So again, I haven't played the original games. I know this is a bit different from the original game's premise, but thinking of recent extraction looter shooters, Deep Rock Galactic is the first one that comes to mind. You kind of choose your mission, you get dumped into these mines, and you have to find certain resources and things and extract them without getting hurt by these monsters that are in the caves. So very similar concept there. I think games like again kind of going back a few years here to Evolve. This was something that came out, I want to say 2017, 2016. Very similar, I think, concept there. You were going in, kind of taking on these large monsters and kind of extracting at the same time. This is a little bit different. I think more, as I said, more focused on the looter shooter aspect. Then again, we don't know anything else about this. This was kind of leaked, I guess you could say, by Tom Henderson here, who has some insights on Bungie. But that's about it. We're going to have to hear more on this game from now on. But people said that it's intended to be the ultimate example of a living game, according to someone who's an insider at Sony. There's going to be seasonal rewards and progression. That'll be a huge part of it, which, again, isn't surprising considering Destiny series and live services. And Destiny has been at the forefront of what I would say is the live service approach for some time now. So it makes sense, of course, with Sony as well at large, wanting more live service titles and more that isn't just their like I usually call their bread and butter, which is their single player narrative games. It looks like Bungie is being able to do that for them. Of course, Bungie is still cross-platform. They're owned by Sony, but like some other games under Sony, they're not afraid of releasing on Xbox as well. I think it's gonna be a really good move for the studio. But again, we're going to see a lot post Destiny is kind of interesting to me. I know 2025 they have said is the year that they want to be moving on from Destiny and have their new projects kind of in the limelight. So within this next 2 years or so, we're going to hear more about Marathon, probably hear more about some other Bungie projects. Who knows? They said they had more than one project going on, I believe. So we'll wait on that, but that's about it for this story. And actually, as I pull this next story, I'm just going to put up our Be Right Back screen for one moment, and we'll be back in about 20-30 seconds. Just bear with me. I'm going to take a quick break right here, and we'll wrap up the show. All right. Thanks, guys. All right, and we are back. Sorry for the brief interruption there, but we're going to continue on here. We're almost done, actually, with the show. We're going to right back into our next story here. So I'm going to pull that up on screen. This one's pretty interesting, actually. It's something we've been kind of following all summer and really have been developing in a scale that I wasn't really aware of how large scale this has become. So as we pull this up here, Netflix is back in the news this week. We've seen that there's been a lot of Netflix news recently, both good and bad. I think a bit reactionary, I would say, after that large layoff there and some of their issues this summer with some streaming titles. We saw a massive drop for Netflix's stock. That being said, they've actually, I think we just got a new metric from them this week as well. They accrued about 2.4 million new subscribers after that. So the stock has kind of rebounded there. Again, a bit reactionary, I think, on the shareholders' part there. But again, they've had a bit of an up and down this year. That being said, we did talk as well about Netflix jumping into gaming, them starting with their mobile game approach on the Netflix app and having some games that you could download as part of your Netflix subscription that we've seen kind of stealing away from the App Store kind of Apple Arcade approach there. That being said, Netflix is not just into mobile gaming, but also into just gaming in general, cloud streaming, just like Xbox, and they're actually developing over 55 new games currently. So that's the big news this week. We get, of course, as you've seen on screen with the headline. But going into the article here, according to Netflix's Q3 investor letter, where I'm getting kind of all this information about the new subscribers and all that, in a TechCrunch Disrupt event as well, the company has noted that they have 55 games in development. Some of them are based on Netflix's existing IPs, which I find very interesting. I think by all means, we're going to get a Stranger Things IP. I don't think that's even a question. I think you'll see some sort of Stranger Things game. Again, I'm losing track of all the Netflix shows now, but there's also, again, this is probably doesn't need Netflix's support, but they do have The Witcher as well. Of course, we've already heard all of the plans there from CD Projekt Red and their development studio. So we know that those games are coming, and maybe they'll have a deal with Netflix there, considering the TV deal. That being said, I'm sure we'll see a lot of Netflix IPs into these shows as well, but also maybe some other things. Again, we saw Arcane on Netflix, the League of Legends IP. Maybe we get a spin-off game there as well. But obviously, there are a lot of IPs that haven't, been done for TV yet. Oh, of course, we have a lot of other things going on with Amazon, with HBO. So it's definitely a large, I would say, kind of rush here to get into gaming IPs and to get these out quickly so that they could be the network that owns the IP. I think obviously, we have every network really heavily investing in video game programming now. They realize, I think, the value of the storytelling and these amazing stories that have been out for so long that I think haven't really gotten the light of day in Hollywood, just because I don't know if they really realized how much, story adaptation potential is here. Hollywood has always looked at books and older movies and things to adapt, so I think they're realizing, oh my gosh, look at how much video game, storylines we can adapt as well. It's like a whole new gold mine for Hollywood adaptations, at least in my opinion. That being said, of course, we have a lot going on here at Netflix. The other one I'm of course missing was the recent Cyberpunk show on Netflix as well, which of course, was tying into the Cyberpunk video game. So I'm sure there's a lot more potential for video game tie-ins here. Exactly how much money Netflix has to invest in large AAA gaming, I'm not exactly sure. We're going to have to wait and see if that's exactly where they are. But I think they start off with a lot of mobile games, a lot of things that are, at a shorter end of development time, but can also have a big social impact and get into a lot of people's hands very quickly. And I think mobile and cloud streaming is kind of the first way to get into that. That being said, I do want to jump off here. We have another article actually after this. I just want to see if there's anything else here I wanted to cover. But I do think Netflix says it's seeing some encouraging signs of gameplay leading to higher retention. Again, that's just talking about their existing games program right now. And they're very seriously considering a cloud gaming service, something along the lines of Amazon Luna, and then now defunct Google Stadia, and of course the still ongoing Xbox Game Pass cloud service. So again, nothing much else there that I didn't just say already, but I do want to put up another article here, kind of part of the same story, in which we get news that an Overwatch veteran developer here, Chaka Sunny of Overwatch and God of War, previously Sony Santa Monica fame, is now starting a new studio at Netflix. It's an in-house studio with some industry talent, and their goal is to reinvent what games can be. So it's a very interesting headline there, very big statement. Again, I'm not sure if that's just kind of sounding a bit hyperbolic there, or if it has some merit. Again, I think you hear things like this all the time. That being said, I really do believe, and again, I obviously someone who's passionate about games, it makes sense that I would believe this, but I do think we are at a point where games can really evolve into something that could be bigger than we ever really imagined or thought before. I talk about a lot in the show how video games are not just a medium, but rather this container for an ever-evolving medium that could always change, not just in content, but in form and function and how you interact with it, whether that's hardware, software, what have you. So again, it's a really interesting idea here. Again, there is really no idea here to share other than them just saying they want to do something out of the box and different. And I'm curious to see what could happen with a service like Netflix with streaming, whether or not it's going to be the traditional type of game I'd gravitate towards. I'm not sure. That being said, I think it's very interesting that we're getting new ideas. We're getting new game studios that aren't under the typical umbrella of what we'd expect a game studio to be. So I'm optimistic here. I'm curious because obviously we really don't have much to go off of, rather than that headline. But I do think it's very interesting what's going to happen here. Something I'll keep an eye on for sure. Again, we don't have any other statements here other than just kind of these inspirational statements that I do think are interesting to read. So I will briefly mention these. They did say this was a Netflix executive, I believe, Mike Verdu, who's the Netflix gaming executive. He said Sonny could have gone anywhere. He could have raised money. He could have done anything, and then he chose to come here. So we were building a team around him and looking to reinvent what games can be. He added, you don't get people like that coming to your organization to build the next big thing in gaming unless there's a sense that we're in it for the long haul and for the right reasons. So obviously Netflix is saying we're not just investing in gaming, just for the sake of it, just we need another revenue stream, and that's what's hot right now, and that's what everybody's gravitating towards. But they're seeing the merit and they're seeing the value in this new market. They're seeing what could happen. They're taking it very seriously. And I hope that's the case. I hope that's not just marketing speed, because I do think that if you are an entertainment period, whether that's film, TV, animation, anything interactive, like I don't see a way you can ignore interactive media for the long term. When I say interactive media, I really mean gaming in general, because I think, what video games are, maybe a limited concept to many people, but as I said before, I think it's going to continue to expand in meaning and kind of encompass a lot of entertainment, especially as we get into the Web3 and the next generation of what comes with, digital entertainment. So again, I digress. Again, pretty grandiose there, but I'm going to finish up here today with a story we've probably talked about, I think, every week in the last year. I can't remember in this report where we didn't cover this story because it's ongoing. There's a new kind of headline every week with this one, and that is, of course, the Xbox-Activision acquisition. A bit of a tongue twister there, but we are going to pull that up here in a second. I'm just going to move my marker down as always, and we'll get that on the screen. But as I said, finishing up here, and you know what? I'm going to go back. I'm going to fix that marker a bit. It's a little sloppy. I think I can do a little better than that, guys. Give me one moment here. And now I'm wasting time with the graphics, but that's okay. There we go. So as you can see here, as I marked it anyway, Xbox-Activision buyout, the UK government is now asking for public opinion. So we've heard a lot about not only the UK government, the US government, Brazil's regulatory board, a few other countries. They've all been analyzing, asking questions, basically interrogating Xbox, even Sony and some other companies about this acquisition and whether or not it would infect a monopoly. This would be bad for the industry across the board, both nationally, internationally, obviously. And again, it's a very much an ongoing conversation because of the implication of this, these monopolistic, tendencies here. Again, I've kind of talked ad nauseum about how I feel about it, so I'm not going to get too in depth on that today. But I will just note that the most recent development is the UK government is now asking. They're in the kind of public opinion stage, so it's not that they're just kind of putting out an open invitation. The way some articles have covered this, it kind of seems like the UK government is just like, okay, we're just going to ask everybody now because we don't even know. That's kind of the way I feel like some of these article headlines kind of phrased it with a tone of voice here, but really it's just a natural part of the process. So during all of these processes here, the CMA, which is the Competition and Market Authority in the United Kingdom, goes through multiple phases. They've gone through the first two phases of internal review, and now they're in the third phase, which is the public review, where they ask for public opinion. And you would formally, whether you're a third-party company, which I'm sure Sony is going to submit something during this phase. I'm sure a few other third-party publishers may say something, which could be interesting. We'll have to wait there and see what Sony or some of those other publishers say next, because they have had some comments as well throughout. That being said, it'll be interesting to see if you are a member of the public. Again, if you're a UK citizen, it doesn't apply to us here in the US if you're watching from the US. But if you're a UK citizen and you want to write an open letter to the government explaining how you feel about this, you can. That being said, most of the discourse, I think, in the public sphere is a lot of just kind of, I think, younger gamers or people on social media saying, well, I like PlayStation, I like Xbox. It's very much, I wouldn't say there's a lot of very strong logic going around when it comes to the social media discourse on this. That being said, of course, there are professionals and journalists and many people discussing this who do have, I think, pretty interesting opinions. And I do think it's interesting that the public does get to weigh in here. Whether or not that's going to affect the actual outcome, I'm not sure. But I think this is something that was widely reported this week. I thought it was worth covering, as the Xbox Activision deal is, of course, ever ongoing, as we've seen. Again, whether or not this will be pushed through, I'm more and more skeptical as it goes on, because we're getting more and more criticism and scrutinization here as this deal gets reviewed more and more. I don't think we saw this much scrutinization during the Bethesda deal, which at the time was the most unprecedented video game deal of all time at around $6 billion. That still went through. There were conversations for sure in terms of exclusivity, Bethesda Game Studios games and Starfield. Of course, that was the conversation for a while. That being said, it was passed, but now this one is an even bigger deal, about double the size, I believe. I think Call of Duty is a way bigger monolith that they're kind of discussing, and the big conversation here is Call of Duty exclusive? Is it on Game Pass? How does that affect the deal, or the monopolistic tendencies of the deal? I digress here. I can't really say where they're gonna land on this here. There's multiple world governments deciding this, so I can't say I'm the best source to give you the exact answer right now about which way this is gonna go. But I do think we're gonna get a few more months of this. It does not seem over, at least anytime soon. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe by the end of 2022, I think we'll get a definitive answer here. But I don't know. This is a tough one. We're gonna have to wait and see what they say. But then again, if you have a very strong opinion and you're in the United Kingdom and you want to submit a letter to the CMA, you can do so until October 28th. So you have about a week to get your thoughts or your grievances in there about this deal. That being said, that's about all I had to say on it. Again, just going over kind of everything we went over this week. We did have some new releases. Speaking of Call of Duty, that campaign came out, and that's coming out fully on next Friday on that 28th as well. So speaking of Activision, they do have some high profile, the most high profile really release, I guess, coming up very imminently. And then, of course, we have God of War from Sony coming up very soon after, in about 2-3 weeks from now. So we'll have a bit more to talk about those on the show probably next week. But all that being said, I think that's about it for me today. So in a moment here, I'm going to pull down our screen actually, and we're going to wrap up. But I want to thank you guys, as always, for everyone who joined today. I really appreciate seeing everything in the chat as well. Thank you so much for the comments. And we're going to talk soon on next episode 31 of the Endless Report. But other than that, again, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for bearing with me over the last hour or so, and enjoy your weekend. I'll see you on the next episode of the Endless Report. So, all right, guys, take care, and thanks for watching.